This is because there is a decreased need, and that can come or has come from really three primary areas. One is our work for inclusion in trying to meet the needs for students here in the school department. The second has to do with some people have moved out of town, so that we're anticipating. That'll be a savings for next year. And that there are students who have had changes in their education plan that don't require to be receiving their education outside of North Reading Public Schools. So those are the three primary reasons why we expect a decrease for next year. The last area has to do with unassigned reduction. That in an effort to help the town meet the enormous obligations of funding all of the services that occur in North Reading, the school department is or has assigned a $40,000 or $41,000 reduction, an unassigned reduction. And the trick is, how are we going to manage that? Well, we hope to, one, by monitoring the budget very closely, that some of the needs that we've identified won't be required next year, that we hope to be able to hire staff, the replacement staff for those who are leaving, at a lower amount, and well, reevaluate the planned expenditures. So we're going into next year knowing that we are $40,000 short of our budget. So in this last slide, it's to bring to your attention again that the major areas of the school department have to do with the salaries, the operating expenses, the facilities, the transportation, tuition, and the unassigned reduction. In this next slide, you have this in all of the publications that we've distributed, is really to talk about the portion, looking at the school budget as a pie, and noticing very well that 78% of our budget is in salaries. These are salaries directly related to student services. Operating expenses are some 8%, facilities are a little over 3%, transportation 4%, and tuition 6.6%. Nancy will provide a summary.
Thank you, Roger.
Mr. Sardella, it appears that we have used up to 15 minutes. How much longer do you require?
About 15 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you. Just in summary, the school department is requesting $13,678,761 for its FY2K operating budget. These are the major components of that budget that you can see listed before you, including an unassigned reduction of $41,000. I'd also like to take the time just to thank several members of town government this evening, Mr. Brad Jones Jr., Mr. Brad Jones Sr., George Dow, Tom Younger, Roger Young, David Troughton, Joe Vino, and I have been working very hard over the last several months to put together a unified budget for the town of North Reading, and we feel that that's what we have presented to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sardella. Thank you, Mr. Young. The Finance Committee. Mr. Jones, do you wish to say anything under this article?
A few random notes. No financial year is an easy year, but this year has been a difficult year. And in fair warning, I will remind you that next year will be a very difficult year. Just for a quickie, if you want to turn to page 3, which is part of the warrant, and there's the Finance Committee report, use of other available funds. This tells you what funds we used this year in addition to normal taxes, and if votes go the way we anticipate, you will come out of town meeting with no free cash. Stabilization will be slightly lower than is printed there because there is an article yet to be dealt with that wasn't known at the time that will take another $60,000 off of that, so you'll be at $576,000. To bring us back to that same level a year from now, somewhere in the vicinity of $1,140,000 of free cash will have to be certified by the state, and that's not going to happen. Having said that, that is sort of a scenario against which we struggle with this year's budget. For the school side, the big stone that was dropped on the toe was Chapter 70. Money was level funded to the town of North Reading. There may be the possibility the state legislature will increase that, but that won't be known until May or possibly June, and that couldn't be factored in this year's budget. Just for interest's sake, in FY96, we had $1.2 million in Chapter 70. The following year, there was a $315,000 increase. The following year, there was a $100,000 increase. And last year, there was $466,000 more dollars. So Chapter 70 kept going up, and this year, it leveled out in spite of growth, et cetera, et cetera. That was probably our biggest budget challenge. And earlier, there was a reference made of some money that was dedicated to that, and that was a sum of $180,000, which we had hoped would normally be included in the operating budget in our attempt to fold small operating capital into the budget. Given the Chapter 70 level funding, given the needs of the school system, and what we felt were in probably the total best interests of people with kids in school and people who don't have kids in school, it was decided to dedicate that money to mitigating in some way that shortfall. Things were left out of this budget. Not everybody's happy. It was a $190,000 additional program for improving our trash and recycling program, partly anticipation in the year 2005 when we will no longer be under the NESWIC. We couldn't do that. The Recreation Department, I hesitate to use the word begged, but pleaded for additional staffing relative to having Ipswich River Park and trying to maintain that. That looked impossible. The Hillview Commission agreed to raise its $45,000 in lieu of taxes to $60,000 with the understanding that because of their charter and state grant that extra money would go and support the extra help for recreation. We still struggle with snow and ice, so there's $59,000 in there for that. So there's a whole matrix of decisions. Not that everybody would agree with every one, but somehow you have to keep the town marching forward, doing the things and providing the services that one wishes for, and hopefully we made our best efforts this year to do that.
Mr. Smith?
This is precisely why I thought we should have went through this budget. We just spent roughly a half an hour with people standing up here telling you why you should vote favorably on this budget as one complete package. But every one of them come up here and told you there's all different areas in here that where monies were transferred from and to and out of and into and everything else. We could have started with the first line item in here and gone through the budget with a little bit of discussion maybe on each one and done it realism But Brad Jones Sr., he's the chairman of the Finance Committee. I think he just indicated to you what kind of a mess we're really going to be in next year. Consistently, what this town has done is tax to the most maximum allowable under the tax levy limit. And what we've consistently done is taken our new growth monies, which is what comes from new construction, new housing, new commercial buildings and stuff like that, and we've applied it and allowed it to be applied to our operating budget. We generally take roughly $400,000 to $500,000 a year and apply it to the tax levy limit. What we've done in a 6-year period is increased our operating budget by $3 million. What's happening now, the town is almost built out where we're not going to have new growth monies coming in. So where's the money coming from to substantiate what our expense accounts are becoming? The school department budget alone increases between $700 and $1.3 million a year. Every single year, that budget goes up that much money. That's roughly somewhere between 5% and 7%. You can't continue to expand our expense area and not have any revenues to fund it. We're getting ourselves in a very precarious situation. You heard Mr. Jones say that we'll be completely out of free cash at the closing of this town meeting. No money. No money in free cash. The only money we have left is stabilization money. And we're even looking at taking stabilization money to fund some projects that are in this budget. We've even gone as low is to take a $47,000 truck for the highway department, and we had to bond it this year. That's how low we are on our accounts. And to pass this budget of $31 million without any questions and having this thing slide through, I was trying to write, we had the lights shut out, people are discussing things, and you had no place to write anything down because you couldn't see. You couldn't even find a pen. And yet, they're saying, well, if you have any questions, ask them. How can you go back to when Mr. Younger started and finish with what Mrs. Sardella said and still try to think of, well, what questions did I have and what part of the budget? We appropriated $100,000 2 years ago in the snow and ice account. This year, we were over $125,000 over that. So we added $25,000. And I said to my board, how can you expend $212,000 over a budget, $112,000 over a budget that we appropriated $100 and only add $25,000 to that budget? And that's what we've done this year. Now, it just came out in the transcript last week, I believe it was, and George, what's your name? Was it 200 and what, Dave? 200 and what? $225,000 what we spent in the snow and ice budget this year. We only appropriated $100,000 in that account. So this year, we magically put in another $25,000. Do we really think that we're going to get away with consistently doing things like this and still be financially sound? I can't see it. Our accountants have told us we're supposed to have 5% of our total appropriated budget, which is $1.5 million we're supposed to have in free cash and in stabilization. We've got about $600,000. We're about $1 million short just in stabilization. I would urge you very, very strongly, let's go through this thing like a town meeting should go through it, line by line, and find out where we're really at with our expenditures, and if in fact we want to put money in or take money out of some expenditures. And just one brief thing. I heard the school committee come up here and say they're watching their budget very closely. If any of you have realized in the last week, the director of new technology and the director of curriculum has just resigned her position. That position came on board 2 years ago at $64,000. The school committee advertised in the local transcript last week that position at the mid-70s as a starting position. So there's $10,000 that have been awarded just in that one position, coupled with a 15% raise to the superintendent of schools in this town in a 12-month period. So think about it. That's $25,000 that was spent in just those positions in the last 2 years. So if that's watching your budget, I don't know where we're at.
Okay, the procedure is on the motion. If you vote yes on the motion, then Article 6 is completed, and we proceed with Article 7. If you vote no on the motion before us under Article 6, then we will deal with Article 6, the omnibus article, line item by line item, the way we have done traditionally. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Jones.
Just briefly, Mr. Moderator, and as I come to you as my last town meeting as a member of the Board of Selectmen, we've worked very hard, and it seems we're kind of darned if we do and darned if we don't, because sometimes we come to town meeting and we seem to fight amongst ourselves quite a bit down front, and I think you all out there question as to why we don't get together and work and try to resolve our differences. So this year we try to get together and work hard and resolve our differences, and that still doesn't, unfortunately, satisfy some people. But it seems to me, when one looks at all the needs of the town, that we've done a fairly good job of meeting those needs. And to one point, that, you know, people having enough notice and a notification, the sum total of what you're presented in the warrant that was mailed to you at your home that you've had for maybe 10 days or 2 weeks to review, maybe what you've had in reading the transcript is being presented. The big difference tonight is the motion we made is for approximately $11,000 less than what you were presented with for your consideration in the privacy of your homes or reading the transcript or watching on TV. And we're more than happy to take questions, and that's why we want to encourage it. But one of the reasons we work so hard together is because we do, or at least the vast majority of us, view it as a town budget, and town defined in the broadest of terms. And I think that's important. We always inevitably get caught up in the us versus them and the we and they. And I'm certain I'm guilty of it at times, and everyone else is at times too. But we've worked very hard over several Friday mornings over the past 3 months on behalf of the